Okay, so in this one we cover FCM or food contact materials in the EU, which can apply to basically any material that's in contact with food or beverage. Could be, you know, one of these stainless steel water bottles that everyone is carrying around these days. Um, Kitchen accessories, lunch boxes, food packaging, wine glasses. Yeah, I think you get the point. So the framework regulation, it basically applies to all sorts of FCM or food contact materials. Okay, this could be stainless steel, plastics, coatings, ceramics, and not to forget something that's becoming increasingly common, which is also composites. That's made of two or more materials. What it does is that it sets restrictions. It limits certain substances, sets maximum levels or limits. Okay, could be lead or cadmium or bisphenol A to give an idea, but also migration levels, because the way that FCM is different compared to say other consumer products. Okay, now for other consumer products we have something called REACH in the EU. It also sets limits, but the difference if you compare a lunchbox to a t-shirt is that you rarely put that t-shirt into a microwave oven. Okay, so it's a difference in that sense. You heat up the plastic, you have your broccoli or whatever inside, and you don't want certain substances because it's heated to transfer, to migrate into what you will then eat, okay, or drink or whatever. So this is why FCM is different, okay, from other products. It's not really unique to the EU. So we're looking at both max levels and also migration levels. Now, keep in mind that the requirements differ depending on the material. I'm going to get to that in a bit, okay? But if we break down the basics, it shouldn't release certain chemicals or heavy metals into the food at levels that are harmful to human health. And this definition changes. Okay, but that's up to the lab to keep track of. You don't have to keep track of that as an importer or exporter in most cases, as long as you work with a lab, that is. Okay, it shouldn't change the food composition, the taste, or the smell. Okay, and okay, this is a repeat, but yeah, I think you get the point. So FCM is a bit different compared to consumer product regulations like REACH, to give an idea. Okay, a big one is the regulation 10 2011 that specifically covers plastics. Okay, keep in mind you need to take this in consideration, not only if the entire product is made of plastic like a lunchbox, but if there's a single little part somewhere that's made of plastic, then you need to ensure compliance. We dealt with a situation like that. So a fairly big brand in the EU, not going to mention them, but um, they they overlooked this in a stainless steel bottle, and it turned out that they there was a plastic part in the lid or something, so they had to urgently make sure that they got their act together when it came to this regulation. So it could apply to lunchboxes, as I said, sometimes made entirely out of plastic, but also like stainless steel bottles that may contain plastic parts in the lid or something, but also obvious products like disposable plastic cutlery, kitchen utensils, and also feeding bottles. There are some additional requirements for that. Another one that is maybe not always like that obvious is also composite materials. We dealt, I think that was last year in 2019, dealt with a customer manufacturing or well, importing plastic, melamine, and bamboo composites, plates and drinkware and so on, to be specific. And they also thought they were exempt because it contained, I don't know, 50 or 60% bamboo or something, but that's not the case. All right. Now the big thing is with this regulation is that you need to issue a declaration of compliance, not to be mixed up with the declaration of conformity, which is something you need for the CE marking products. Okay, it's a different thing. Well, different but still the same. Um, Now, the declaration of compliance is a bit more complicated. You need the basics like the company name, the address, the SKU, the date, and also list which FCM regulations that your product is supposed to comply with. You also need to provide data that relates to the testing process, the lab testing process, like the surface area, and you also need to provide information about about storage. Should it be like what temperature can it be stored in, what time, and so on. Okay, um, and this is something that can be fairly tricky to get. So you need to work with your testing company to get information at least about the lab testing procedure and also specific substances. Okay, there are a number of other regulations and rules that apply to specific products and even origins on materials. So there's a BPA restriction for plastic infant feeding bottles. Okay, uh, something that applies specifically to recycled materials, ceramics, active and intelligent materials. Yeah, not even sure what that is. And this one is interesting. Products originating or consigned from mainland China or Hong Kong. Okay. I think that's related to the melamine situation or scandal that went down in, I don't know, 2008 or something. Okay. So how do you know which regulation apply to your product? My recommendation is that you reach out to a testing company like Chima or Intertech, and you basically give them a breakdown of every single component. Because, as I said, a plastic lid can change, which regulations apply, even if the rest of the product is made of stainless steel. Okay, so that's one thing to consider. Give them a breakdown, a list of components and materials, and the way the product should be used, and the origin, and so on. And based on that, a testing company like Chima or Intertech, and they say, okay, we believe that you need to comply with this and this and that regulation, and in turn we need to do these tests. That's my recommendation. Now, another aspect of the EU FCM regulation is also product traceability, that you may need to add a tracking label, so that in case of a recall, in case it turns out that, okay, you imported or manufactured a batch of products and you're unlucky, resulting in having a product containing excessive amounts of restricted substances, then you need to do a recall. A traceability code can help you to identify that specific product based on SKU. The manufacturing date doesn't have to be one single day, but could be the month and the year, assuming you only place one order that month, production facility, and also country code. So that way we have SKU, EF76CN. Okay, I can't even remember what that means. I guess we had some sort of idea when we put this together, but I think you get the point. What matters is that you can actually trace that specific product down to a batch of products and then recall that batch of products instead of, say, all products sold that year. Okay, FCM lab testing. Now, lab testing is necessary to verify compliance, to specifically check the substance levels and also migration levels. Okay. Now, the data, as I said, is also needed for the declaration of compliance. Without lab testing, you can't really fill out a declaration of compliance. Well, unless you have your own lab, which, given that you're watching this video, I don't think you do. So you're probably going to have to reach out to a testing company. It could be Chima, SGS, Intertech, and so on. And as I said, point 4, they can also help you assess which regulations may apply to your product. Because when you go back and you see all these different rules and so on, which, by the way, may be outdated tomorrow or maybe already, okay? So you need to work with a testing company that stays up to date and actually qualify to make that assessment. Whatever you do, don't go to your supplier. Okay, keeps getting more complex. There's also something called GMP, or good manufacturing practice, that also applies. That's also like part of the EU FCM framework regulation. Basically, GMP requires that there is some sort of like control and documentation during production. So not just about passing the test, but that materials are pre-selected and procured, that the production and quality assurance process is carried out according to pre-established instructions. Quality control and verification system is established. Utilize good and proper production facilities during the manufacturing process. And this is pretty vague. Um, all I can say is the way that our customers have been dealing with this in the past is that they have been sort of creating checklists for their manufacturers to basically fill out, okay, the supplier has checked incoming materials, that you have maybe notes in the performa invoice that this and that material has to not contain this or that substance, could be another thing, and also quality control documents, which you normally have at least if you're importing products from China, Vietnam, or India, other countries here in Asia. But to be honest, I haven't really seen anything definitive. So my take is that the customers that actually do care, the companies that actually bother with this, and there's a lot of them that don't, which I absolutely don't recommend you to do. They have different takes on this because it's pretty open-ended, right? I would reach out to the national market surveillance authorities that cover FCM in your country. That's what I would do. I would ask them, okay, what, in practical terms, what sort of GMP documentation do you actually expect? And maybe you would get something. But yeah, that's really my only suggestion when it comes to GMP, because it is really vague. Okay, and then there's also the symbol. You've probably seen this one. It's a glass and a fork symbol. And at least as of today, it's only required if it's not obvious that it's an FCM. It's a product that's supposed to be used in contact with food or beverage. So if it's a mixer, well, it's a mixer. We know what a mixer does. But maybe if it was the first mixer in the world, maybe you would need one. I think you get my point. Or if it actually is a fork. I think we all know how a fork works by now, what it's used for, so we wouldn't need that. But if you come up with, I don't know, something new, or if it's an exotic design, then you may need it. Okay. All right. Sorry, that's from the template. Now, anyway, I suggest that your next step is to try out our free product compliance information tool, which, the way it works is that you input information about your product, the product name, the category, materials, usage, and so on, packaging information, and in which country you plan to sell it. And based on that, the system then generates a PDF report with information about labeling, lab testing, documentation, and so on that may apply to your product. Okay, it's not definitive, it's not a guarantee, but it's a good first step. So best of all, it's also free. So go to compliancegate.com/free, or you can also subscribe.